Hi, Andy Schmuckler, and I'm presenting what I call a better human story, which is the fruit of my life's work and something that I think has some has I, a vision to contribute that could help human civilization survive. Sounds grandiose. Uh, that's puts me in an awkward position because I see it that way. In the previous talk here, um, I spoke about the destructive, social evolutionarily selective force for the ways of power that inevitably arises with civilization. And that gives rise to a whole lot of things that we'll go into later about the bad guys, the what I'll call a coherent force that consistently works to make the human world more broken or worse or whatever you want to say. That's for the future, but it, so that we've just looked at it in terms of its being a selection for the ways of power out of a war of all against all, destructiveness ramifying in certain ways, but we didn't pursue it a whole lot. Just what all is gets unleashed as a consequence. But we'll get to that. Right now, having introduced what amounts to the bad guys, or since I see it as a coherent force, it's not a guy, it's just a systemic dynamic. It isn't malevolent in terms of having a will and intent, but I can show that it acts very much like what evil used to be understood as. And I have spent some time wondering whether the people who, in traditional religious terms, conceived of evil, were seeing the same thing that I'm seeing, but somehow expressing it differently, or just reached analogous conclusions based on very different stuff. I don't know about that, but this thing does act a lot like what people have always called evil, a force of evil, consistently working to make the human world more broken. So those are the bad guys. Today I'd like to talk about the good guys. We got good guys because we are crafted by an evolutionary process that's continually choosing for life over death. I mean, that's how it works. The only way selection can work is if the ones that don't have the adaptive traits don't succeed in getting their DNA into the future, and the ones that do. So our secular culture has a way of thinking about reality that has had some, this is how I interpret it. I see certain facts, I make certain connections. You can judge for yourself if those connections are warranted. But we think of reality as something which is objective. It's out there. And as a result, or in conjunction with that, we think that the level of experience within us is subjective, merely subjective. It is not a first-class reality. And I think that is a significant error, that it has led to an undervaluing of certain essential dimensions of our human being that are there for a reason. That's the way evolution is. I mean, there are exceptions, Stephen Jay Gould speaks of spandrels. Not everything is there for a purpose, but I think these two things that I'm going to talk about are inherently of such depth and magnitude that I gotta believe they're not there by accident as a byproduct of anything. They're there because the process that was crafting us differentiated between those of our ancestors who had these experiential tendencies or capacities and those that didn't. In other words, having these experiential tendencies help people survive and pass their DNA into the future. That's how evolution works. And experience is not merely subjective. I mean, subjective enters into it, and idiosyncratic enters into it. I mean, we're not all born identical, and we don't have the same set of experiences that take our inborn individual nature and make it into, our own individuality as we go through life. But we got certain basic things in common. And one of them is value. Now, if you look at value in terms of just what's objective, then you come to the conclusion, well, there is no such thing as value. And, our secular culture is full of ideas like value is just a matter of opinion. The merely subjective means, second class. There's not truth to be found there. Big mistake. Our basic evaluative structure as human beings is sort of like part of our basic anatomical structure as human beings. I mean, noses differ, but, we all got noses. And that list could be lengthened considerably. We all got some inborn experiential tendencies that have to do with value. Value is something that life moved into as a realm because it was a very good way to select things to survive. I mean, I don't know how many things have an experience of value. Does a tree? I mean, there's a lot of things coming out about trees lately. My kitty cats do. I know that. And our relationship is based on my knowing and appreciating that. But how far down it goes, or I know up, down. I mean, there is a complexity of experience that there is a far back, to, in a sense, lesser levels of experience and greater. I mean, I think elephants have significant experience, dogs. Well, anyway, it's built into creatures because it was one way to motivate their ancestors to do whatever it was that survival required. We benefit, in terms of survival of our kind, by doing the things that survival requires. And therefore, we place a positive value on eating when we're hungry, drinking when we're thirsty, sex when we're horny, the list, living in a loving relationship, having security, enjoying a spirit of goodwill around us. And I think we've got a lot of things that are built into us. I think we've got a lot of things that are built into us that would have chosen to have a different kind of civilization than we got. That's going back to the other issue. So experiential structuring took place in order to bolster survival-enhancing behavior. And value entered the world. It now actually did matter what happened. If there were a universe in which there was nothing that experienced things in terms of better or worse, nothing would matter. How could it matter? Matter to whom? I mean, you can put God into the picture and say, well, it mattered to God that the light was good. But something's got to have some experiential level of things. Value exists in the level of experience. It can only exist at the level of experience. So no wonder a secular worldview that thinks that things are real only when they're out there couldn't find value real enough. So I've had a couple of times I've been a teacher. Once in my 20s at a place called Prescott College. Once in my late 50s at a first class private institution for 16 and 17 and 18-year-olds. And I've had students say things to me like, if asked, well, getting into a conversation about basic questions of, let's say, good and evil, pardon the expression. That's that for another topic. But was what the Nazis did at Auschwitz wrong? And I've had students say to me, what the Nazis did at Auschwitz isn't what I would have done. But it seemed right to them, and so it was right for them. It stuck in my mind. I've even had students who identify strongly as Christians say that. So I think that there's a stream in our culture that I see as part of the secular culture that devalues value, that tells us it's merely subjective. But no, reality translates from level to level, and the reality of life against death in a evolutionary world means that what gets crafted into us is something that we should be paying serious attention to. It helped our ancestors survive to feel that this is better than this. And what's more important, at least than that, and it also provided a roadmap in that pursuit of happiness, because we are motivated to seek out things that feel good experientially, and they feel good because that was motivating for our ancestors who survived. So we've got survival and we've got fulfillment. It's a better experience. Things now do matter. It's a different whether a kitten is stroked and purrs or whether it's being tortured. They are not the same. It matters in the only way that value could ever matter. And it is such a core place where life serving goes on that we shouldn't give it second class status. The secular worldview should deal with issues of value with a greatly more profound sense of respect and regard for what's real, important, and life-serving. Moral passions for us. Now, I know that cultures and individualities make for a complicated, there's no we don't have infallibility in the complexity. But fundamentally, Value is about what serves life, what helps for survival, and what leads to experience that the experiencing creature finds positive. That's the only way value can be. And those components that are crafted within us about value translate into an important source of guidance in the battle between life and death that's going on as human civilization is evolving. There comes in the bad guys again. There is a destructive force that we need to bring under control before it leads us to kill ourselves. The best way to get there is to tap into the moral passions that are in favor of what is good, which maps very well with what is life-serving. Complicated, of course, but the basics. We want to give recognition that something sacred, I would say, is there built into us. If life is sacred, if human consciousness has anything sacred about it, this is part of it. Value is real, important, and life-serving. And the secular worldview needs to incorporate the truth of that. Okay, second dimension was the spiritual. There's something that I think that I know about human beings and the spiritual dimension. Partly I know some stuff from my own experience, and I've alluded to some of that, and some of it I can't explain as much well as I'd like. But anyway, it is a human universal, as far as I know, that in any culture, any at all significant population. I mean, by significant, I don't know how. I think that if we were a hunting-gathering band, there would be at least some among us who have the capacity for a spiritually transformative experience. I mean, I believe that some study or other that I came upon, I can't give you a footnote, indicated that something like a third of Americans report having had some kind of experience that I think would fit under that criterion, whether it be within a religious framework or otherwise, some moment. I mean, I've reported that I had a moment in 1970 that changed the course of my life. And actually, sometime maybe I'll tell the story of that. Or anyway, I've had, let's see, 3 or 4 experiences that were spiritually transformative to me, and they've all the course of my life always sort of took a new direction in the wake of each one of those. One of them's writing a book that's back there called Out of Weakness, Healing the Wounds That Drive Us to War. Another one was the one that launched me in 2004 in trying to address the rise of a very dark force in America that I perceived rising in the political realm. That might be it. But anyway, I could tell about that sometime. But, there's nothing particularly unusual about human beings. It happens, to so many people that I think what we need to conclude is the capacity for such an experience is built into the human genome. That's Tazu chai, the best chai I've been able to find outside of, well, actually, pretty much anywhere. Anyway, built into the human genome means that those of our ancestors who possessed this capacity were more likely to pass their DNA into the future than those that did not. Or, or at least, those gene pools, maybe you only need, one shaman in a given Siberian community, or one wizard in a given Amazonian community. Somebody has to do the job, though, in a given human group. Or let's just say you're more likely to pass your DNA into the future if that's represented. So that means, just a jerk translation, it means that the capacity, the human capacity for spiritually transformative experience is life-serving. So that's a big thing. And I think it directs us to look at, the content of spiritually transformative experiences and the impact of spiritually transformative experiences. People come back usually with some kind of a spiritual truth. I did. I think that if you look at I speak here without quite knowing enough substance to feel at all sure, but I think that if you were to make a huge catalog of everybody's statements about what they came back with in terms of spiritual truth, I think it would be on the whole, I think it would be a very positive picture. I think things like love thy neighbor as thyself would be well represented. And I think that the God told me to kill all these people thing would be an exception. But I don't know all that. I do think that we can see that cultures allow themselves to be guided by the fruits of these experiences, whether it be a Siberian group in the whose shaman comes back with information from some spiritual realm that the group takes seriously and is influenced by. So that could be a sign that what they brought back influenced their behavior in ways that aided their survival. I think that that's a reasonable conclusion, or we wouldn't get outfitted with this. Especially, we see, other societies. A lot of what various religions present looks to me like derived from the fruit of some person back ways having a spiritually transformative experience. But again, I can't say that I know that, but it does feel to me like what we see in the Bible, for example, is the Ten Commandments, and there are people who had sort of big visionary experiences, and they wrote them down. And the same with, when you see the precepts of Buddhism and stuff like that. And they all, for the most part, point in very positive directions. So I think that we get truths that matter that way, and we get motivated, empowered. One of the things, besides the content, there's the impact, which is that people's lives get changed. I find myself thinking about one of our astronauts in this context, but actually it was more than one who went up into space and looked back down at the earth and saw this thing that came to be called, I guess by him, I'm not sure, a blue marble. And it was a spiritually transformative experience for a couple of American astronauts to see this thing, which was looking at things from a new point of view that human beings had never, in all the thousands of years or however long you want to go back, nobody had ever seen our planet. None of our ancestors had ever seen our planet from that point of view. And they had a spiritually transformative experience about the earth and its fragility and the need to take care of it. And there's something about that which makes me feel like there is something in us that seems like we are given at a spiritual level an impactful truth that moves us in directions that we need to move. This all took place, of course, they couldn't, putting man into orbit is for sure going to be at a time when human civilization is exercising a lot of impact on the planet. But in any event, whether it's coincidence or not, these astronauts had that spiritually transformative experience at the very time that it was coming into view with this environmental movement that we needed to treat Mother Earth with more love and respect. And so this picture that the astronauts took of the blue marble sitting out there in space became made into a poster. The blue marble. On the cover of something famous for us, the hippies of that era, the Whole Earth catalog. Anyway, the blue marble was on lots of people's walls. And it was a kind of a religious icon. And it was a message from that capacity within us, is at least part of the answer, is telling us something that we needed to hear. So, like value, the spiritual dimension of experience is real. It's built into us. I mean, if noses are real, and noses are red, no, violets are blue. If noses are real, spiritual experience is also real. Life created it because it was life-serving. Real, important, and we can tell that from the place that these things have in cultures and in individual lives. I mean, this is sort of like the deepest, most powerful place that people get to. And life-serving. Or at least during the era of our ancestors, whatever people got in terms of understanding or in terms of motivation or the combination was likely to help them survive. So the secular worldview that has sort of just shunted spiritual things also off to a, woo-woo, airy-fairy, not that any of this is easy, but the dimension itself, however we experience it, needs to be treated with respect and listened to and tapped into to help motivate us, if we can get our vision clear, help motivate us to move the mountains that we'll need to move if human civilization is going to get onto the track it needs to get onto. So, those are the good guys. We're up against a destructive force, which I can call the bad guy. We need to put on our white hats, fortify ourselves by seeing the true nature of the challenge that we face and what's good and what's sacred. And we need to order our civilization in the direction of the wholeness we need if life is going to win over death on this planet that has experimented with us, this species, about whether we could meet that sacred central challenge. Anyway, that's my world. Welcome to it. I hope you'll come back. We'll be talking about another dimension of this whole integrative vision I'm calling the better human story. Thank you for listening. I am actually grateful to any of you who have stuck with this through this point. Bye-bye.